Ladies and gentlemen, 7:30 on February 24th, 2014. Welcome to the Dover City Council meeting. Start off this evening with an invocation by Bishop Thomas Polsey, followed by the pledge to our nation's flag, led by Councilman Hare.
Our Heavenly Father, we ask your blessings upon every councilman that is here tonight, and we ask that you bless their families and strengthen them. Give us wisdom, knowledge, and understanding according to the purpose which we have convened here today. And God, we ask for these blessings. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Council, you have before you this evening's agenda. Are there any deletions or additions to the agenda?
Move for approval as presented.
Second.
Moved and approved by Councilman Hutchison, second by Mrs. Williams. Any question on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now we have before us the consent agenda. Those items on the council agenda that are considered routine and non-controversial are marked with an asterisk and will be acted upon by a single roll call vote of council. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of council so requests, in which event the matter shall be removed from the consent agenda and considered as a separate item. Pleasure of council.
Move for accept.
Second. Moved by Mr. Hare, second by Mr. Slavin. Any questions on the motion? Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Wynn?
Yes.
Mr. Berza?
Yes.
Mr. Slavin?
Yes.
Mrs. Williams? Yes. Mr. Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Hutchison?
Yes.
Mr. Downing?
Yes, motion carries unanimously. Item number 2 this evening on the agenda is presentation of Heels and Feels Bike Walk Summit. I'd like to welcome Kate Layton.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Thank you for having me. Well, again, I'm Kate Layton, and I'm the public liaison for the Dover-Kent County Metropolitan Planning Organization. The MPO is one of the agencies that's a partner in the planning of this event that's taking place on March the 21st at Clayton Hall at the University of Delaware. That's a Friday. And this event is the culmination of a lot of talk about how we can make Delaware better. I've come here in the past to talk about the Delaware Bike Summit. And after the last one was over, which was in 2012, the planning committee for that event got together with some folks from state parks and the Delaware Parks and Recreation Society. And we talked about how we can make the event even better. The state parks and Parks and Recreation, or the Recreation and Parks Society, that was the team that put on the Delaware Trail Summit in 2010. And when we talked about it, we talked about the various needs. It became apparent that Delaware's needs have grown beyond just bicycling and more than just trails and walking, but into a combined effort for a need for cycling, walking, and hiking. And so by combining the forces, we redubbed the event to what this is, Heels and Wheels. And so I'm just trying to take this on the road a little bit and encourage people to attend. As of this morning, we had a little over 130, maybe 135 people already registered. Registration opened on February the 1st. And I think we're taking, as of this morning, I think we're taking anywhere between 225 and 270 seats. That's what we have room for. And so there's still time to register. There's still plenty of availability. You can go to wilmapco.org, or you can go to the Dover-Kent County MPO website at doverkentmpo.org, and there's links to the event to register on both those sites. We've put together a great agenda, I think. We have Dan Burden, who is a nationally renowned bicycle and pedestrian coordinator. He's the summit's keynote speaker. We'll also have speakers from in and out of Delaware to talk about building and maintaining recreational trails, the economics of bicycling and trails, safety, transportation planning, and other topics, including an update on the Trails and Pathways program. And then we plan to cap off the summit with a walk and a bike ride along the Pomeroy Trail in Newark. So again, the summit is going to be held on March the 21st, starting at 9 in the morning, Clayton Hall, University of Delaware. And so again, please register. It's a free event. There's lunch included. Great conversation, great speakers. I encourage everyone to attend. Especially municipalities are a good candidate for something like this to learn a lot about maybe overcoming some barriers. So, but it's also geared around anyone who is anywhere from the avid cyclist and trail user and walker all the way down to just the casual user or the everyday cyclist and walker. Any questions?
Questions from members? Thank you, Kate. We
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Item number 3 on the agenda is a annual report by the Dover Human Relations Commission. Invite Roy Sutler to the podium.
Good evening, City Council and Mayor. Carlton Carey's not here. The Dover Human Relations Commission 2013 Annual Report submitted by Roy Sutler Jr., Chairman of the Dover Human Relations Commission. Currently on the screen, we're looking at contents of presentation. 1, DHRC enabling legislative powers and members of commission. 2, operating procedural flow chart. 3, intake forms and statement forms of Dover constituents. And 4, Dover Human Relations Commission's concerns. 5, certificates of training and participation. 6, adoption of resolution titled Cessation of Illegal Gang Formation in Dover, Delaware. Sorry if you could just move the time. 7, conclusion. And 8, questions regarding Dover Human Relations Commission 2013 Annual Report. The enabling legislative powers and duties of the Dover Human Relations Commission is pursuant to Chapter 2, Administrative Article 1, Division 6, Section 2-21, and Article 2, Section 5831, titled Human Relations Commission's Purpose. The purpose is to promote diversity, inclusiveness, and fair treatment among all residents of Dover, while monitoring racial tension and hate crime activity in the city of Dover. The Dover Human Relations Commissioners are 1, Mr. Roy Sutler Jr., the chairman. 2, Ms. Dawn Allen Pine, vice chairwoman. 3, Dr. Phyllis Edamatsu. 4, Dr. Linda Hackett. 5, Ms. Faye D. White. 6, Ms. Justine Brewington. 7, Ellen Owasfi. And 8, Richard Sonato. In the year 2013, only 1 commission member resigned, Richard Sonato, who returned back to the State Human Relations Commission to serve another 3-year term in mid-2013. The Dover Human Relations Commission's active committee: 1, Intake Screening Committee Chair, Justina Brewington. 2, School Program Chair, Ellen Owasfi. And 3, Assessments Chair, Dr. Phyllis Edamatsu. The Commissioner's fiduciary duties are: 1, all members of the Dover Human Relations Commission is to be non-biased in investigating and resolving case disputes. Commission members exemplify unique professional and personal characteristics that are imperative for allowing the Commission to properly carry out and effectively accomplish the objectives, functions, and serve contemplated by Division 6, Section 2-21 of the Dover Code. Our procedural flow chart states that once a commission has received an intake form from the residents of Dover. It is then submitted to the city clerk's office for a case number and placed on the commission's business meeting agenda under new business 10 days prior to the next business meeting. Pursuant to the flow chart, the commission is responsible and charged with investigating the facts, merit, and jurisdiction of the complaints in a hearing session. The commission only hears both parties' testimony and does not make a decision during the night of the hearing. The commission's recommendations for action and jurisdiction is assessed at the decision-making meeting, which is held at a later date determined by the commission after considering all the facts and circumstances related to the complaint. Content 3. DHRC intakes form reported. 1 alleged unfair housing practice claim against the Dover Housing Authority. One was received and assessed by City Clerk's Office and City Solicitor that this matter was not within the jurisdiction of the Dover Human Relations Commission and was therefore forwarded to the State Human Relations Commission. 2 alleged police brutality complaints against Dover Police Department. One of the 2 complaints of the alleged excessive force and police brutality was submitted to Chief of Police, Dover Police Department Chief James E. Hosfield, who then forwarded to the Internal Affairs Division for the Dover Police Department, and the other case involves a litigation suit for the amount of $50 million against the City of Dover's Police Department. 3, one alleged excessive damage to citizens' vehicle complaint due to Dover Police pursuit chase. Number 3 was reviewed and assessed by the City Clerk's Office and City Solicitor as a matter of the civil court and not within the purview of the Dover Human Relations Commission. And 4, 9 written documents regarding unfair treatment concerning minority constituents of Dover, Delaware. Exhibit A and B, page 56 and 57 of your annual report. You can please review further. We now move to item 4, Dover Human Relations Commission's concerns. The Dover Human Relations Commission, item A and B under content number 4, are concerns that the City Council, along with the Mayor, might be able to address in the near future. But item C, the Dover Human Relations Commission recommends that the City Council and Mayor of Dover, Delaware consider authorizing and conducting an exclusive independent study by a third non-partial entity separate from the City of Dover to ensure and mitigate reservations of the integrity of the study's results in an effort to not only assess the merit of these allegations, but to ease the psychological duress and concerns that affects Dover residents' quality of life and daily activities in the City of Dover. Few examples would be 1, statistical analysis of minority versus non-minority complaints of alleged excessive force and medical attention needed after an arrest. I have said that Chief Hosfield has already taken a proactive approach, and he's already looking into that, and he has come to the Dover Human Relations Commission, and he is starting to look into that. That's great. As you can see, I don't have enough time to read them all because I would like to get through the whole annual report, but if we could take a moment just to review them. Okay, we're going to move on here. Number 5, National Neighborhood Works Training. Number five, the National Neighborhood Works Training identifies various ways to develop one's leadership skills and organizational design that focuses on developing an action plan to assess and address social problems in community, SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that contribute to undesirable communities to do business or reside in. It was a partnership with INCAL Affordable Housing and Research Agency as part of the Downtown Initiative Plan. 5.2. Training was also received in fair housing initiatives under the Delaware Department of Justice, crime-free multi-housing program training, page 25 and 26 of the DHRC 2013 annual report packet. After receiving training, the DHRC partnered with the Department of Planning and Inspections to conduct a review of the newly adopted city ordinance number 2013-04, section 22331 and 37, in an effort to mitigate ambiguity of landlord and tenant's obligation to manifest a safe rental dwelling climate that deters delinquent behavior and commission of criminal enterprises in quest of eradicating undesirable residents and their guests who engage in unlawful activity and delinquent behavior throughout the city of Dover. The third partnership involved the Chief of Police Department, James E. Osfeld, Mayor Carlton Carey, and the Dover Human Relations Commission Chairman Roy Sutter Jr. The purpose of this partnership was to immediately assess and decrease racial tension escalating between the Dover Police Department and certain community members of Dover who are concerned about Antonio Barlow's alleged claim of police brutality and excessive force being exercised on him by the Dover Police Department in 2013. Please click on video coverage for your review on page 39 of the Dover Human Relations Commission 2013 annual report packet. Item 6. City Council and Mayor of Dover, Delaware unanimously adopted the Dover Human Relations Commission's 2013 resolution titled Cessation of Illegal Gang Formation in the City of Dover. This initiative was written to help improve the nation's response to at-risk youth and business owners' complaints of graffiti and gang activity that is not just occurring in the City of Dover, but throughout the state of Delaware. If you allow me, I'm almost done.
Go ahead.
Item 7. Well, these are some of the graffiti pictures that influence the initiative for the resolution. Item number 7, in conclusion of year 2013, on December 19, 2013, the Governor of the State of Delaware, Mr. Jack A. Markell, appointed DHRC Chairman Roy Sutter Jr. to the State Human Relations Commission to serve from 2014 to 2017. I have decided to accept the appointment made by Governor Markell and would like to thank the City Council and Mayor for contributing to and enhancing my professional growth and development. My DHRC colleagues, former 4th District Councilperson Ruben Salters for nominating me in 2014 for the Dover Human Relations Commission, and 17th District Senator Brian Bushweller for nominating me for the State Human Relations Commission in 2013. That will conclude the annual report for the Dover Human Relations Commission. Are there any questions?
Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Sudler, and thank you for your service to the city over these years. Appreciate your service. Forward to seeing your new post with the State Human Relations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, item number 4B is the future use of the Dover Park Recreation Center. Request Councilman Dixon, the Chair of the Parks Recreation Community Enhancement Committee, to brief us on this item.
From our meeting, our last meeting of the Parks Recreation and Community Enhancement Committee, the committee recommend 1, authorizing the city manager to execute necessary contracts to demolish the former Dover Park building at White Oak Road Park. 2, directing that an earmark of $80,000 be placed into 2014-15 draft budget for capital improvement to White Oak Park, with specific allocation and expenditure timetable of the said earmark fund to be determined by 2014. Parks and Recreation Needs Assessment Study 3, authorizing placement of temporary toilet facilities at White Oak Park effective immediately. That's a report from our meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Any questions on the report from the committee? Pleasure of council. Mr. Persa.
Yes, May. The application will be to approve the recommendation made by the committee.
Second.
Second by Mr. Hutchison. Is there any questions on the motion, Mr. Lynn?
I'll be voting against the committee's proposal. And with all due respect for the committee, I believe that they did a good job in working through this issue and analyzing it. But frankly, I don't think it goes far enough. A reading of the proposal leaves several ambiguous, open-ended questions, such as the following. Directing that an earmark of $80,000 be placed into the 2014-15 draft budget for capital improvements to White Oak Park. That doesn't mean a building. It means capital improvements to White Oak Park. My concern is that history has shown us, just as recently as our last council meeting, our propensity to dip into capital improvement projects for other means. The public will recall that at our last council meeting, we took money from our streets project and from the inflow and infiltration project to fund the Garrison Oak Technical Park. I find it ironic that our item 6 tonight is more money into Garrison Oak Technical Park at a cost not to exceed $80,000. My question on that agenda item is where that $80,000 is going to come from. It's likely that it will come from something else, and one of those things could be $80,000 from the Dover Park Recreation Center. I don't trust that a future council or this council will, in fact, replace this building. We should not be in the habit of destroying or tearing down 40-year-old buildings. This building was left to deteriorate. It was left to rot. It was a purposeful decision. And we can't continue to engage in business in this fashion. We did the same thing at our last council meeting last week, or 2 weeks ago, with units 1 and 2 of our electrical generation facility, where by virtue of negligence and neglect for 50 years, we took no affirmative steps to plan for the replacement of those items. And here we are 50 years later without units 1 and 2 in our electrical generation facility. Our infrastructure is failing. It's failing at an alarming rate, and we aren't paying enough attention to it. Looking at this, I think it's too wide open. So placing $80,000 into an earmark does nothing. The building is our leverage to get something else constructed there. And for me, as the representative of the 3rd District, I simply won't vote for this because there's no definitive plan to continue to provide services that are needed for the east side of Dover. Accordingly, I'll be voting no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Any other comments? Mr. Slavin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Picking up on what Mr. Lynn had said, some of the comments he made, I had made similar comments to previously about my distaste for throwing away buildings, and I think that's exactly what we're doing, is throwing away a building that we caused the problem with. We caused this problem, and now we want to claim that it's beyond the pale to restore this building. In fact, it's a classic case of demolition by neglect. It was a decision that was made by a decision by drift, if you will. I appreciate the work of the committee in identifying some solutions. However, the idea of an earmark to be placed in a draft budget, to me, seems a little insincere. I don't know that an earmark is a process that we've ever used in this council, and placing items in draft budgets is akin to my daughter giving me a Christmas list that I simply can't afford. I don't believe we've exhausted all the options we have for this building, and I too will be voting no to the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slavin. Mr. Persa.
I guess in response to Mr. Slavin and Mr. Lynn, I think the committee has acted with full sincerity of listening to all of the comments made by members of the community and by members of the city of Dover and by people outside of Dover who have looked in at the process. The committee that made this decision spent months of time meeting with professionals, meeting with members of the community, and with city staff on how the building's been used in the past, what plans for the building, and what we're going to be doing with it moving forward. The city concluded, I think wisely, on how it needs to invest the funds moving forward. I agree with Mr. Lynn that the city has dropped the ball and let infrastructure erode. I think there's no question that's happened in this circumstance. However, I'm not willing to spend 3 times the amount of what it should have cost just to keep a building. The process that the city's enacted in adopting a annual, or the Parks and Recreation Needs Assessment, is the process by which we will determine what to do with the park, how to improve the park. It's not our job to tell the community, you have to have a building, you have to have this, or you have to have that. The process that the mayor asked us to do is create a roadmap to determine those questions, and we've attempted to do that. We can't answer those questions now until the public comes forward and says, this is what we would like. If they want a building, they're getting a building. But we're not going to spend 5 times the amount on a building just to keep what we have if it's more affordable and more efficient to create a new building in its place. So I guess contrary to that, in response to the mayor's previous vetoes of this, is that we've attempted to meet the questions he's asked by laying out a roadmap, but it's going to require the community answering those questions. This process will only work if the community participates and informs the city, this is what we want. And if that matches what the needs are, then that's what the members of the community are going to get. So I think, the city in the current budget circumstances, we don't get 2 chances to do this. If we put all our eggs into one basket and it's not the right decision, there's no do-over. So I think it's important that we move forward accordingly and responsibly. So that is the reason the committee took the actions it did. And I think it did so in a way that was respectful for everybody in the community and with full sincerity.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mrs. Williams? Then
I'd
Mr.
also like
Hutchison.
to thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank the committee for all their hard work. I know this was difficult. As a provider of services to kids in the community and kids on the east side, I am very much aware of the needs of the kids and very much aware of the needs of recreational resources. Quite like Mr. Perza, I believe that you don't spend 5 times the amount to restore a building that is damaged and could be injurious to the health of the children. I would like to also clarify one other thing, and I'm going to direct this directly to Mr. Lynn. Mr. Lynn made a comment that we have lost units 1 and 2 due to neglect. Units 1 and 2 are 50 years old, and anybody who owns a computer knows that machinery is outdated in 5 months, not 50 years. So the cost, by the way, if we had decided to clean up units 1 and unit 2, Mr. Koenig, wasn't that in the millions?
I believe it was in the neighborhood of roughly $5 million over a series of years.
And we're using the same business model with those units as we're using with the building in the Dover Park. I've worked many years with Mr. Salters, and I share his concern about the kids and the lack of resources. And I, for one, am going to support efforts to get services back over there as soon as possible, but not spend 5 times the amount of money for a building that we can find ways to get this thing taken care of without doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Hutchison, then Mr. Hare.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I am totally committed to the White Oak Park Recreation Program and its future. The truth is, I don't know what the future is, because we need to do an assessment to find out what the needs are today. And that's why we're asking our city planner to look at the recreation program that is taking place throughout the whole city, not a part of it, and get a total review of what is taking place, including the state, the county, the city, and private sectors such as the YMCA, the Boys and Girls Club. There's so many, and churches, there are so many programs today that quite frankly we need to have a master plan to see what it is. And then what we need to do is find out exactly what the needs are at White Oak Park. And then we will address those. Does it mean that we're going to build a new building next year? No. It means we're going to find out what the needs are. And if in fact we need to build a new building, then we will address the issue. But I think that this council has made a firm commitment of $80,000 to start. Now, I come from the old school, I still get I cited over $100. So when you say 80,000, I'm very excited. And I don't think anyone can say we're walking away from the needs and concerns of the people of White Oak Park. We are committed to that. Just give us an opportunity, and quite frankly, it's our responsibility to find out what the needs are before you start building. As far as the old building, I've been there, I've seen it. It doesn't fit the needs of your needs today for recreation. So I would only ask that all of you, please support us, give us a chance to do what needs to be done. Thank you.
Fair.
I'm going to say some things I've said in the past. One, if I lived on the east side of town, I wouldn't send my kids to that building. I'm sorry. I wouldn't send them there. It's disrepair. It's not safe. I'm not disputing there needs to be a building there, but as I've said before, why not a building that is functional? Something that has a gym floor. It doesn't have to be a huge shooty park type building, but something where they can go shoot basketballs, where they can run around, where they can have a program. The building that's there now is not functional for what kids need or want. And as Mr. Lynn said, history has shown us a lot. And history has shown us a lack of participation for programs that are offered in that building. That's why it's gotten that way, because nothing's happened there. We need a more functional building over there. You're not going to get a more functional building until you tear the one down that's there so we can start doing something. And I support a more functional building, whether it be like a pole building. I'm sure you've seen them, a pole building type building. There's one being built right out here on New Burton Road that would be a good size for over there, that you could put a gym floor in there, some basketball hoops. We used to have programs with Capital School District where we could share their gymnasium and have programs in there, but they always started wanting too much money, and we had to charge too much to have programs there. Maybe you go to their meetings and say, why aren't you helping the youth in the community? You know, like you did before you started charging so much. They don't pay taxes for their properties. So I think the building needs to come down. It's not safe, and I support putting something in there, whatever needs to go there. I mean, is it a splash park? Is it a skateboard park? Is it a building, half a smaller building with a skateboard park attached? I don't know. I think that's what needs to be looked at and needs to be done, but something needs to be done. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. Mr. Lynn?
Just addressing Ms. Williams' point first and then moving forward. When one knows that machinery has a finite life, that it will exist for only 50 to 60 years, one makes the prudent, reasonable person, the financially conservative person, would start setting aside funds knowing that in 50 to 60 years we're not going to have that piece of machinery like units 1 or 2. The problem is that council in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the early 2000s did nothing. They anticipated that units 1 and 2 would exist on into perpetuity without us ever setting aside money to replace them. So when you say machinery doesn't last forever, when you buy a new computer, you know it's not going to last forever, I agree with you. But the reasonable, prudent person makes contingency plans for what happens when that's not there anymore. And that's where council continually fails. And we're going to fail again. We did it when we invested street money and inflow and infiltration money into Calpine, into the Garrison Oak Park. Here we are again. We have a building. Let me just clarify for purposes of Mr. Hare's comments, Mr. Hutchinson's comments. I'm not advocating that we save this particular building, but I don't think that setting aside $80,000 for a draft budget does anything. We need a building there. It doesn't have to be this building, but it can be a new building. I agree with you. But the problem is, once we demolish this building, the leverage to put anything there is gone. If setting aside $80,000 in a draft budget that may not ever be used to do anything at White Oak Park is a disservice to the people in the audience and to the residents of the east side of Dover. We could decide during the draft budget that $80,000 could be used for anything, because this is a council that can't keep its promises. So we can't promise the citizens of the east side of Dover that we're going to use this $80,000 for anything, because once that building is torn down, the impetus, the motivation to actually do anything with that $80,000 is gone. And council can go back on its word, like we did with the streets, like we did with inflow infiltration, like we did with our electric generation equipment, by failing to plan for the future for units 1 and 2 over the last 50 to 60 years.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Mrs. Williams, then Mr. Hare.
I don't want to continue arguing with Mr. Lynn about previous councils and about machinery he knows nothing about. What I do want to talk about is one of the things I think we can use that $80,000 for. There's a building that's getting ready to get demolished that makes the Dover Park pale by comparison, and that's the high school gym, the entire Dover High School. The boiler room, the cafeteria, and both of those gyms are within the same section of that building. What I suggest is that we get together with, and I understand that the school board had to make a decision that they were going to tear down the building in order to get the money for the new high school, but there's got to be somebody that we can meet with in the state, and we can find out if that building could be used. If it could, kids could be transported over, and we would have two full-size gyms for kids to use, not just kids on the east side, kids all over the city. Now, those are things we can do with the money. Don't buy that thing that if you don't know where the money's going, it's going to get wasted. There's a million things we can do to make this investment grow and grow and grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hare, then Mr. Slavin.
Okay, just two things real quick. The electric utility, back in 1993, we did make a decision, and we realized that there was going to have to be some things done, and that is why in 1993 we reached an agreement with Duke Power to come in, take over the units. They were going to maintain everything, and we weren't losing money, and they were going to maintain it until in the 2000s, when they said, okay, costs have gone up, which costs do go up. They said we need to do this and increase what we're charging a little bit. And they said, nope, we're not going to do it. We can do it better ourselves. Thus, what you said, obviously, we couldn't do it better ourselves. So this is what we end up with. And as far as the 80,000 being earmarked, or 100,000, I don't know, that maybe the whole council as a whole might not, whatever you said, but Mr. Lynn, you can guarantee, and I can guarantee, that if you and I vote to put 80,000 aside for that park, and somewhere down the road they say, well, we're going to use 80,000 to let some company from Uzbekistan come in and get free land at Garrison Tract for 10 years with no taxes, there's not going to be a little noise heard between at least the two of us? I mean, I think we can keep that money there. At least you and I can be heard one way or the other. But yeah, I agree. If something needs to be done, and if they were going to earmark 80,000, as long as I'm sitting at this table, the 80,000 will be for that park or the building that's going to be built there.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. Mr. Slavin, then Mrs. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to belabor this. I know a vote is imminent on this. I did want to extend my apologies to Mr. Perza. My choice of the word insincere was not directed at your work nor the work of the committee.
I didn't take it that way.
It was a poor choice of word on my part. I have too much respect for your work as a councilman to have that be the outcome. Just a point of fact on this. The $80,000 that we've talked about here for the last 20 minutes does not exist. Okay, it does not exist in any budget. Okay, it is proposed for a budget we have not even discussed yet. And if we were to take the same revenues we have today The only way we could have $80,000 is to raise taxes. Okay? That $80,000 that everyone wants to save or wants to spend does not exist. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slavin. Mrs. Williams?
I would just like to make a final note that I think that it's so detrimental to members of council and to the public and to all the citizens that we represent to play this stupid blame game all the time. What we need to do is get together and come up with solutions. Thank you.
Persa.
Just a real final quote. The answer to the 80,000 as to where that number came from, and to the extent, if institutionally we don't recall, is that the project was to environmentally rehab the building, and it was somewhere in the ballpark of $110,000 at that point, with the anticipated demolition cost to be 30. When we did the public hearings, is the sentiment in the community is they didn't want us to knock the building down and walk away. We didn't, and the city did not want to turn its back on the park. Did not want the impression that we were knocking the building down to save $80,000 on a $100,000 project. So we weren't pocketing the money, applying it to other sources. The way, and everybody's right, there is no budget for next year yet. We don't have any money for next year yet. We could defund the entire Parks Department for next year if we wanted to. But at this point, to demonstrate to the community is we were willing to do it, is to direct the city manager when the budget's prepared to insert the balance of the funds that were not going to be spent on environmental rehab, but committed to the park. And that was the intent of it. Mr. Lynn's correct, is if we wanted to, we could defund the entire thing if we wanted to. If we have a financial crisis, we could lay off the entire waste collection department. All that is subject to annual reviews, but the intent with regards to meeting with the public was we're going to give you that this project is important to the community. We'll invest those funds, but we can only spend 30 of it right now. We don't know how to best spend the balance of that project, but we'll at least reserve that money for whatever that future use to determine is. The mayor wisely pointed out that we need a mechanism to determine that. It's not our call. It's up to the people in the community. That's where the parks assessment process came by. So the parks, or the citizens in Dover will determine how best to spend the money. We want to put the money aside, but Mr. Slavin's right. It may not exist. It could get gobbled up. The entire Parks Department could go away. But at this point, this council is making a determination to tell the city manager, put the balance of that project into the budget for next year, and all we can do is go from there. So that's where that's the explanation of where that came from. So it's not a made-up number, or it all came from the collaboration and intake with the public.
Thank you, Mr. Persa. All right, the chair has allowed you to have all your comments with the pleasure of council.
You already have a motion?
Got to have a motion first.
We have a motion.
I think I made the motion. I don't.
All right,
Somebody
we have a motion and a vote. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Can we repeat the motion so we know what we're voting on?
The motion is to approve the committee's recommendation authorizing the city manager to execute necessary contracts to demolish the former Dover Park building at White Oak Park, directing that an earmark of $80,000 be placed into the 2014-15 draft budget for capital improvements to White Oak Park, with the specific allocation and expenditure timetable of the said earmarked funds to be determined by the 2014 Parks and Recreation Needs Assessment Study, and authorizing placement of temporary toilet facilities at White Oak Park effective immediately.
Everybody clear on the motion?
Mr. Dixon?
It's binding me to the point right now I don't know which way to go. I'd like to see the building done. I'd like to think the council will go along with what we say we're going to do. But there's nothing guaranteed here. I'm going to say no.
Mr. Lynn?
No.
Mr. Persa?
Yes.
Mr. Slavin?
No.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Hare?
Yes.
Mr. Hutchison?
Yes.
Mr. Bono?
Yes. The reason I'm voting yes is to get this off center and get it moving.
Chairman,
Yes.
if I could, I'd like to
Motion
make,
passes.
everyone needs to understand, we do not have an election this year. So everyone sitting around here who made a commitment, they're going to be here to get the chance to vote. So we will move this program forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchison. I will say, as we finish this up, this discussion, I will tell you that I've got about another year and a half left on this council. And for the next 18 months, I'm going to work as hard as I can to make sure that there's a new building out there. A building that's fitting, a building that's purposeful, and a building that the residents of the east side of this city need and deserve. I will not let White Oak Park go without a building that is out there to serve those children and the adults and the other people that want to use that facility, because I think it's imperative. Thank you. Mr. Lynn.
I would urge the residents of the 3rd District and everyone in attendance tonight to email, call, write the mayor a letter, and ask him to veto council's actions tonight.
Thank you. Mr. Harris, go ahead.
Go ahead. Get him to veto it. You'll never, and I'll just stop fighting for a new building out there, because you're not going to get a new building if we don't get rid of the old one.
Mr. Hare, I think we're out of order here. Let's move on. Item number, I need a motion to accept the report of the committee.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Williams, second by Mr. Slavin. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Carries unanimously. Item number 6 on the agenda tonight is the amendment to the engineering services agreement related to the Garrison Oak Technical Park. Mr. Koenig.
Thank you, Council President Boner. This action form is a follow-up to the bid authorizations for both the pump station contract and the site work and associated improvements to the Garrison Oak Technical Park. As most council members know, we have been in a design for both land planning and engineering design of the Garrison Oak Technical Park since 2009. And we have been before council on several occasions to amend that design contract as tenants of the park became more viable, and we were working our way through the final and intermediate design tasks associated with the development of land in the city of Dover. Tonight's proposal addresses a series of final design-related issues. I'm going to go through them by name first and then in detail in a minute. First was White Oak Road, a drainage redesign. The second, water main redesign for the internal subdivision, along with water main redesign at each entrance to the subdivision. Entrance upgrades, including geometric improvements, pedestrian refuge islands, and mill and overlay design negotiations to reduce construction costs. The next item was a conditional letter of map revision, or a CLOMAR, of the current floodplain delineation, as-built survey of the tax ditch improvements, and the letter of map amendment in accordance with the Federal Emergency Management Agency regulations. As you may recall, in September of 2009, City Council authorized $322,100 for engineering services with the Becker Morgan Group. 2 of the original tasks were eliminated from the contract, reducing that contract value to $289,500. In August of 12, City Council authorized an additional $88,000 to address utility design changes and environmental considerations. In May of 2013, there was an additional authorization of $86,900 to address, again, utility design changes, hydrology and hydraulic analysis, geotechnical evaluations, bid specifications, which brought the approved total to $464,400. If you'll turn to page 2, which is a detailed table that Sharon Duca has prepared for us, on the right-hand column, dated February 14, proposal fee. These are the final contract changes to finalize design plans and create closeout documents for the Garrison Oak Technical Park. The first item in the amount of $5,000 is required to remove improvements that were previously designed with the subdivision at the direction of the Kent Conservation District. If you'll recall, there has been a flooding problem on White Oak Road for a number of years down near the Oak Shadows subdivision. We were working with the Conservation District to come up with a design that would help alleviate that flooding. We extended design services to accommodate that in the Garrison Oak Technical Park across our property. In the end, in the final approval of our plans, the Conservation District has developed a subsequent design that does not involve our property. So the improvements that were previously associated with the Garrison Oak Technical Park and the drainage problem on White Oak Road were no longer necessary, and they were taken out of the final design plans. However, there was a cost to amend those documents of $5,000. Water system improvements are identified on here. This was to create the final design drawings with the 16-inch water main design as necessary based on the hydraulic analysis of the water system associated with both the Calpine Energy Center, or the Garrison Energy Center, as well as the build out of the park. So this completed all of the water line design across the Garrison Oak Technical Park, as well as the tie-ins to White Oak Road. The next item, entrance upgrades at $15,500. The original design plans envisioned a hammerhead at each entrance. As I indicated when we were discussing the improvements for Adel construction, the final entrance designs for Garrison Oak Technical Park are included in the bid packages for Adel. So the hammerhead design had to be upgraded to accommodate what we believe will be the build out of the Garrison Technical Park. Those design changes, along with DelDOT reviews, and there were multiple iterations of the reviews, including the pedestrian islands, removal of some pedestrian islands through the process, negotiating regarding the overlay of White Oak Road and changes to the width and elevations of White Oak Road were all part of that engineering analysis that was required to get final sign-off from DelDOT. The next item are Clomar upgrades at $25,300. These are engineering design improvements that are required so that we can comply with our own City of Dover ordinances with the floodplains, as well as challenges or inquiries from the Federal Emergency Management Agency regarding development adjacent to or in the floodplain. So from a standpoint where we're a developer, yet we're also a regulatory agency, we felt and still feel and will always feel that it's in the city's best interest to comply with all of the regulations outlined both at the local level, the state level, and federal level. So this Clomar is a necessary entity for us for the Garrison Oak Technical Park. The next item, the as-built tax ditch, those are improvements that will happen after we have done all the excavations and improvements around the tax ditch, but this will give us a final as-built drawing so that we can meet any legal requirements if we have to change, if we have to file amendments to the tax ditch, and really comply with the tax ditch law as it's written, as well as local ordinances. The last item is the LOMA. It's the letter of map amendment. It is the final basic step once all the construction is complete to ensure that we are complying with the floodplain requirements that are outlined by FEMA. And basically, it's our document that allows us to say that we have, in good faith, adhered to the regulations set forth by the federal government, and we'll be able to demonstrate from a development standpoint that we followed our own rules and completed the project and are able to demonstrate that what we designed and built is equivalent. Those are the series of design changes that were necessary and are necessary to complete all of the engineering associated improvements for the Becker Morgan contract. And I would direct you to the lettering under funding source. This is an $80,800 expense. However, this expense was included in the deficits that we talked about when we authorized both the Adel contract and the George and Lynch contracts at the last council meeting. So these are not inflating the project budgets further than what you have seen before. This amendment was alluded to when I discussed things that would be coming forward after the bid approvals. This is one item. There will be a second item that comes forward in short order related to the moving of 4 electric poles, one of which ends up right in the middle of this entrance until it gets moved. So there will be one more project that comes forward at a later date with respect to the Garrison Oak Technical Park. I would request that council give serious consideration and authorize me as the city manager to execute the final amendments for the Becker Morgan contract to complete subdivision design, as well as the construction documents associated with the Garrison Oak Technical Park at a cost not to exceed $80,800 over the previous authorizations. This will bring the final contract or cumulative contract amount to $545,200. I'd be happy to answer any questions associated with this request, but I do believe that this was identified as our #1 economic development project. It has been a painful exercise in land development, in my opinion. However, we are in the final stages of getting this project completed, going to construction, and then eventually developing the remaining lots so that the job base in Dover expands. Happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Slavin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The design fee, the original estimate, how is that compiled? What is that based upon?
The original estimate for design was based on the number of acres and what Becker Morgan thought they would need to incur to get the project to a
Based on a
certain
percentage of the build-out cost? Estimate of the build-out cost?
Not that I know, sir.
How did we miss the estimate on this by?
This is something that certainly, I think back in 2009, if we had moved to construction quicker, the prices would have been less. However, it's been strung out over a number of years. And as time has moved along, the reviews have gotten more intense from DelDOT. The entrance design have changed. At the same time, the expectation of the tenants has become more clear, so there was the hydraulic analysis associated with Calpine. In some cases, you can use the word scope creep, obviously, because as we move forward in the design process, we in some cases had to redo some things for hydraulic analysis because the first review became seasoned and they wouldn't accept all the numbers as they were written, so we had to redo some things.
All right. Perhaps it's the cruelest of ironies that the amount you're asking is $80,000. In the last 20 minutes, we talked about $80,000. And had those people stayed in the audience, they'd find very quickly how we can find $80,000 for this project. I've mentioned last time I'm growing a little fatigued of the overages on these projects, and this just adds to that fatigue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slavin. Mrs. Williams and Mr. Perzo.
Mr. Koenig, did I understand you correctly in saying that the majority of these costs are DelDOT related or bureaucratic related as it applies to the floodplains and the wetlands out there?
I would say some of the $15,500 for the entrance upgrades is DelDOT related. The amendments to the floodplain are roughly $45,000 to $50,000. So that issue alone is running a majority of this problem.
The majority of this is being driven by the floodplain and the bureaucracy.
This is a majority of it's being driven by compliance with everything that every other developer has to work with. Yes.
I understand that. Has there been any request of the state to help us out in this sense? It's DelDOT that is requiring so much of the changes in that entrance.
No, Dell does not have that kind of funding available to us.
But the state does in other areas. Have we made any overtures to that effect, since this is also a state economic development project?
No, we have not at this point.
Can we? Is that a possibility?
Can always have an ask.
Well, then I would like to go on record as, let's ask for some help here, because we've gone way, way, way over what we at first intended, and it's not been driven by insanity, it's been driven by getting this project to completion and having this park available, and as you say, ultimately jobs for Delaware.
Yes.
So, let's ask the state for a little help. The worst they can say is no.
Persia.
I have 3 questions, one of which I think the city manager partially, I was going to ask, how does the city know that this is the final change? But I think you indicated there was one additional change coming related to these poles. Do we have any sense on what that change is going to cost? And is it practical to consider both of them together instead of separately?
It is not practical to consider them together tonight. The amendment tonight is only related to the Becker Morgan design contract. Okay. The moving of the electric poles is roughly $550,000. I think that's the upper limit of the cost. That project has not been fully vetted at this point to come forward to council.
Okay. When the city develops these programs, and granted this was done back in 2009, has the city examined whether there's a truth and cost type of analysis? My sense in the year and a half I've been here is that we've had projects that have been approved in the past, but are consistently coming in, doubling the original budgets. If this was one that was approved for 304 years ago, and then each year there's been changes. Now some of those changes, as an engineer in my background, I understand things change on the scene, on the land. You can't factor that when you do a proposal. But some of the expenses related to tax ditches is, everybody knew that this property was in a tax ditch, and to me that would have been a cost that would have been factored back in 2009, or whether there was recording subdivisions, if it's 11,000 for that, all that has to be done as part of a project. And it just feels that certain projects are being undervalued, perhaps to get the council to agree on them, and then later on the budgets are kind of getting expanded once we're 4 years into the project at this point. It's difficult to walk away from it, but the concern is, it's 80,000 for this, it's going to be 500,000 for something else, and the total cost of the project isn't 300 that the city was told years ago. It's now $1 million. And is there any way that the city could rectify that in how they do future bids or future projects to eliminate that as a possibility, so at least the councils are approving reasonably accurate cost estimates?
I think the answer is, in this case, this is a unique project in the sense that the city does not act as a land developer very often. In fact, this is the only time I can recall that we've acted in this type of capacity where we're designing a subdivision. The staff does not intend to come forward and mislead the council on any project numbers when we come into these projects. I believe they're using the best information that they have available to them. We can spend significant money on engineering design and engineering estimates, and I think that is something that Mrs. Mitchell and I have discussed moving forward, is how do we do a better job of locking down these costs effectively, not just putting a number out there so that we can move forward. There are a lot of moving parts to that. There's inflation, there's changes to the work environment. It's not a static environment in doing these things. When we ask an engineer to estimate something for us, they usually give us a lot of qualifiers, like based on most recent history or things like that. So unfortunately, there's no penalty for them being off. There's a penalty for us being off because we end up here in conflict with council. So the short answer is, I think we need to do a better job in presenting these projects to council. In this case, Mr. Slavin's question, I honestly don't know how to answer that. When we talked about this project back in 2009, we didn't talk about the ultimate build-out costs. We didn't talk about the total project value when you add in the tenants and stuff like that. So I just simply don't know how to answer that question. In this case, when we started the project, I think the city manager and the staff at the time the project was started felt that we were doing the preliminary design for the subdivision, and that the subdivision would move along quicker. We'd have more tenants, so that the design would move quicker. That has not been the case. It's taken a number of years to get to this point. But as I said before, it's very difficult to be a land developer and also be the applicant and regulatory person in the same instance, because we do not wish to be perceived as negotiating with our own staff to cut our costs. So we're taking what I would call the high road on all of these things, where if the staff is asking for something, or if a regulatory agency is asking for something and it's reasonable, not completely off the charts, we're doing it to comply. That's not to say we're not negotiating with them if we think they're being unreasonable. The engineering discussions we had regarding the water system and the types of taps and stuff are a good example of Delta was asking us to do something we simply didn't think was the right thing to do, but it took several iterations of design to prove to them that the way we were asking to do it was the correct way.
I didn't mean to imply that city staff was intentionally not bidding or pricing contracts, and Lord knows the city staff's been overworked and undermanned probably back in these years to that extent. Would it have been possible, or is it possible in the future, to the extent that the city has to act in this capacity as a developer? Is that something that can be, can you bring in a third-party professional developer who knows how to do that, who would be, it kills me to spend money, $50,000 to hire a developer, but in this situation, if we would have hired a developer to do that for $50,000, it at least have told us is we've got a budget for $1 million project, and it's not coming as we're not getting sticker shock as we are now. And yeah, and I don't know if they even do that, but is that something that the city could examine for future type of development work?
Yeah, I think there's always a business person out there that would take that risk, because
that could basically look at what we are putting out there. Beckham Morgan says it's going to cost $300, and if they're saying no, you guys are forgetting about all these factors, and it's really an $800,000 project. Right. I think City Council back then probably would. It may or may not change the idea. If the concept is jobs for Dover instead of jobs for Delaware, but if it's jobs for Dover, council's going to be hard to pass that up. But at least for purposes of getting an accurate price tag on it, it might help.
To my knowledge, we did not take the initial $300,000 proposal and go to developers and say, is this reasonable? I don't know that conversation did or did not happen.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any other comments from Mr. Lynn?
I just want to say, I absolutely agree with Mr. Perza. I think he's right on the money. And what I would refer to it as kind of reactionary budgeting. That I just see a kind of continuing trend that we're always on the reactive end of things. There's always a kind of an imminent crisis. We have to do this, and I always think to myself that had we been more proactive, had we looked at what's plausible, what's coming down the pike, that perhaps we could have planned better. But every time I'm here, there's always, if we don't do this now, then this parade of horribles is going to happen. And it's kind of over and over and over with this reactionary budgeting.
Welcome to government, Mr. Lynn. Mr. Harris.
I probably don't say this that often, but I agree with Mr. Lynn. I would like to see, and Mr. Slavin too, I agree with, I would like to see, in simple layman terms, what we have spent going into Garrison's track, and what are we anticipating that the great Savior Calpine is going to give us back in return that we're going to make, and what Who Gives a Nut's going to give us. Forget about jobs, because when jobs come to Dover, if they buy houses in Dover, that's wonderful, we get taxes. But if they come to Dover and work and live out of Dover, it doesn't help us that much, any more than it. But I want to know where this money's coming from. I mean, we seem to find millions for Garrison's track, but we can't find $150,000 to build a new gymnasium, build a little building at White Oak Park. But we can find it for the Garrison track. So just a simple breakdown. Here's what we've spent to date, 20 million or whatever it is, and here's what is anticipated annual return will be from what Calpine and Who Gives a Nut's going to give us. And then let's just see what the return is. I mean, I'm curious, if from a business point of view, I mean, it sounds to me like we could be better off telling them, don't build out here. We don't need your business anymore. It's costing us too much money to have all this great economic development.
Thank you, Mr. Hare. Mrs. Williams, Mr. Lynn, then Mr. Hutchison.
Mr. Koenig, isn't that what our energy attorney's trying to do right now? Isn't that the power service agreement we're trying to get?
Our energy attorney is trying to negotiate a power purchase agreement. They're not completely tied together, but they have influence on each other.
Right. So we may not know until those negotiations are complete.
I have a good idea of what Mr. Hare is looking for. It's something that we started preparing, so I'll be able to get some preliminary information.
Okay. Thank you.
Lynn?
Just a question, I had a question before I was cut off earlier. Why Becker Morgan?
Why Becker Morgan? You mean for this contract?
Correct.
They went through a submittal process, if I recall correctly, and we selected them as the engineer for the design services.
But for this particular portion of the contract, was this bid out to anybody else, or was Becker Morgan the only entity that had an opportunity to come in and say, this will cost you $80,800?
The only part that really could be bid out separately would be the Clomar portion of it, but because they already have the survey, when we looked at the numbers, we felt that they would have given us at least a close number, if not the lower number. We did not competitively bid it out.
Kind of a subsidiary, tertiary issue to all of this, in addition to, you know, the many concessions that we have made for Calpine, is this constant selection of Becker Morgan for every engineering project that comes through the city, be it through the you know, the downtown coalition or city council. It seems over and over that Becker Morgan is consistently the engineering firm that we hired. I'm somewhat dismayed that no other local engineering firm had an opportunity to even look at this before we just, you know, unilaterally chose Becker Morgan.
Would you like me to respond?
Sure, yeah.
We do have two other engineering companies working in the Garrison track, both Pannoni Associates and URS. They don't have a Dover office, but they have a Delaware office. And so the engineering design for those services has been spread out. In fact, the staff purposely sought a separate design contract for the pump station because we wanted more than one engineer looking at this project because we felt it would give better prices. So while there's a large focus on the land development side of it, there was a $365,000 engineering contract that was issued to, I think it was Pannoni, or it was either Pannoni or URS for the pump station design.
Mr. Hutchison.
Question to the city manager. State of Delaware, they also have given the concessions to Calpine regarding this site location.
The state of Delaware, Calpine applied for and received a infrastructure grant of either $2 million or I think it was $4 million associated with the extension of the gas line from Jeswald. The state gave us the land. The state also gave us design fees, I think, early on in the neighborhood of $400,000 that were Okay. The state gave us a grant and we bought the land. So,
Well, I think it's important to understand when you get in the business, economic development, very expensive. And certainly we knew that when the state of Delaware gave us $2 million to buy the Garrison Farm. And we certainly have worked with the state on this issue, working with Calpine. Unfortunately, because of many different factors, the cost continues to go up. And because it's been longer than we thought it was going to be, and because of the changes in state regulations, the costs have gone up. But I certainly think that when you take the total picture of the financial commitment by the state and the city, at the end of the day, we're making a tremendous commitment to the future of this city, this county, and this state. Thank you.
Ms. Williams?
I believe that many of the things that we've done too is for the build out of the park.
yes.
Not just the Calpine site. So when we talk about legacy and what we will leave behind, I believe that this is one of the things that there are, how many more units, businesses that could go in?
There's either 11 or 12 lots left to develop, so yes.
We've pretty much built it out so that it would be ready to go, right?
Yeah, the planning side of it anticipated a wide variety of businesses that could go out here that met the zoning requirements. So these are the costs to build out the park.
Right.
Calpine has been a big driver because of a utility demand on the water side as well as the wastewater side. But the infrastructure that's being put in was designed based on a certain number of parameters to accommodate the full
original
build-out.
parameters, I believe, was for one silicone processing, wasn't
Yes,
it?
there was a point in the beginning where we were anticipating one single microchip facility, which never,
Which never occurred. And now we have places for 13 separate industries, right?
I believe it's 13 additional lots. 12 additional lots.
With Calpine and the current ones being utilized?
Yes, the LS Power lot, the Calpine lot, and the Uzanuts lot, there are 12 additional lots beyond that.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Any other comments, members of council?
Is this the final change? I mean, are we sure this is the final change?
God help me, yes.
All right. I mean, I
This is
don't
the
doubt.
final change I plan to bring forward.
If it costs $545,200, it costs $545,200. It kind of just irritates me a little that we were told 300 4 years ago, and it's now what it is. It may have been that from the start. If it is, then we got to keep through with it and finish it. But it's irritating that we've doubled the price, and for jobs, I'm sure the council, if you were told them 500,000 4 years ago, probably would have done it, I would assume. But it just
We weren't
that's just
told
the
anything
appearance.
4 years ago. The city manager didn't tell us very much at all. It is not the present city manager.
Just the final change.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other comments? I would remind council that once this is completed, we're looking at about $2.3 million in additional revenue, 1.7 to $2.3 million in additional revenue, sewer, water, and electric, just from one tenant.
We've spent that 3 times already.
Over 40 years, it won't amount to a pea in a pod. And, quite frankly, I have to think that this council needs to think bigger than 2 or 3 or 4 years down the line. We need to think 20 years down the line. And when this is built out, and if it takes 10 years to build it out, it takes 10 years to build it out. Fact remains, it sat there for 10 years, and it wasn't anything but a cornfield. And now we have a power plant going in, we have a manufacturing facility going in. Those are all gonna bring jobs. And when we finish out the rest of it in the next several years, we have someone that's worth their salt that can bring people into this community to make development on that Garrison tract, then we will have made a wise investment. And I'm perfectly confident that we will. This economy is gonna turn around in the next couple of years. It's beginning to turn around now. And I would much rather be poised 2 or 3 years from now to be able to hand the keys to a piece of property out there and then say, wait 5 years until we get it developed. And so I think we've made a good investment out there. That being said, what's the pleasure, council?
Move to adjourn.
You got an issue before you, Mrs. Williams. I would love to accommodate.
I just thought I'd throw that as a random thought.
Thank you very much. Motion denied.
Move to accept his recommendation.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hare, seconded by Mr. Williams to accept the staff recommendation. Questions on the motion? Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Dixon?
Yes.
Mr. Lynn?
No.
Mr. Persa?
Yeah. Yes.
Mr.
It hurts.
Slavin?
No.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Hutchison?
Yes.
Mr. Bone?
Yes, motion passes 6-2. Thank you very much. It's been a little bit longer than we thought it would be. I'd like to, this moves us on to the council members' announcements. Anybody have anything they want to announce? That being said, I'd like to remind everyone that the video recordings of city council meetings are now being made available on the city's website and on YouTube. We'd like to thank Ron and Mark for Comcast and Brian of Delaware.net for their assistance in helping us make this service available. If there are no other items, we stand adjourned.